Hello, this is Adem Carroll from Justice for All, the UN Programs Director. We've been working for many years on the situation of the Rohingya genocide. The title of this panel, Building Partnerships and Building Solidarity, is a reminder that while we are advocating for specific urgent actions, justice in international courts, the passage of a bill, sanctions against perpetrators of war crimes, or humanitarian relief, we are also movement building for long-term success. Partnerships with governments or NGOs or with the impacted communities requires sensitivity and special attention. Sometimes when we are faced with emergencies, it may be difficult to fully include all stakeholders, which can lead to a lack of unity and consensus. This past June, the Myanmar Policy Strategy Meeting, a 12-hour-long meeting series hosted by American Jewish World Service and Global Witness, among other organizations, gathered online to strategize action steps with government and non-governmental groups. An important part of this meeting was Burmese civil society presenting on their activities and key priorities, as well as how the international NGO community can support their work. First, international organizations could better provide a platform for Burma's civil society to ensure that local voices are heard. More coordination is needed. Concerns were expressed that international NGOs have contributed to the narrowing of civic space by excluding local community organizations from decision-making and focusing on big ticket items like the peace process and accountability without getting into the details of what makes a difference for actual people. Today, we have 4 panelists who not only have really great experience and expertise on many aspects of the ongoing human rights crisis in Burma, but can also speak to the partnership building that is so essential to support in any effort we make. So the first panelist we have is Nadira Kourt, Program Manager at the Global Center for the Responsibility to Protect in New York. She focuses on multilateral advocacy and the United Nations response to mass atrocities, including by the UN Security Council, General Assembly, Human Rights Council, and the Office of the Secretary General. She has been integral to the coordination of NGOs working on Burma in New York. Nadira holds a master's in global governance and diplomacy from the University of Oxford and a BA in international studies from Earlham College. Previously, she worked at the Quaker United Nations office. Welcome, Nadira.
Thank you so much, Adam, for the introduction, and many thanks to Justice for All and to Burma Task Force for organizing this webinar, especially during the month of March, as we know, which marks the 3rd anniversary this year of the Rohingya genocide. I'll be speaking about various parts of the UN and how their responses to the Rohingya genocide and to other atrocities in Myanmar can be strengthened. I will also, as suggested, comment on how to build alliances better and what actually can we advocate for, what states can do and what NGOs can push for. So I'm going to start with a big overview of action to date by the UN. As we know, the UN is not one entity. Usually people talk about the UN as if it was just one organism, but it's actually a multitude of bodies. The UN Security Council often gets the most attention and arguably has the most powers, but we also know that there are serious limitations to the work of the Council, lack of support of certain members, including China, who often threatens to block any actions on the Council. I'll get back to the Council later and touch upon other bodies first. So the Human Rights Council has actually been instrumental when it comes to the UN response to Myanmar. As you know, the fact-finding mission was created by a mandate by the Human Rights Council. It was created to establish facts around the human rights violations by the military and security forces. And the mission released very important reports in this regard. Of course, it was a full account of violations by the military in Rakhine, Kachin, and Shan states, They covered the financial empire of the Myanmar military, the sexual and gender-based violence, and crucially, the fact-finding mission found that the security forces committed acts of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. And importantly, that those crimes were ongoing at the time when the report was published last year. The Human Rights Council also continues to support such important mandates as the Special Rapporteur mandates on the human rights situation in Myanmar. Yang Yili was a very important voice on Myanmar for many years. Now we have Thomas Andrews, who's the new Special Rapporteur, and he already has made some important statements on Myanmar, including in regard to the upcoming election. The Human Rights Council also established the IAM, which is the investigative mechanism for Myanmar. We'll refer to it as IIMM. So those mechanisms are not only crucial in establishing facts, but also supporting accountability mechanism. You talked about in your previous panels about the ICJ case, and both FFM and IAM have been crucial in that regard, especially the FFM. The case has heavily relied on the FFM findings and actually enabled the Gambia, because of those conclusions, to take that case to the International Court of Justice. The other body I want to talk about is the General Assembly. So unlike the Security Council with the veto power, the GA includes all states and also has very important powers. So far they have requested the Secretary General to appoint a special envoy. They also provided funding for that position. The General Assembly also fully funded the IIMM mechanism. So that also was quite an important action, because as we know from other mechanisms, including a similar mechanism for Syria, where the funding was voluntary from voluntary contributions, that really negatively impacted the ability of the mechanism to operate effectively. And as we know so far, the mechanism is operating right now, and they're able to share their files and their findings as requested by international courts, which will be crucial for ICC case that is ongoing, for ICJ case, and any other accountability initiatives in the future. So that brings us also to the role of the Secretary General when it comes to Myanmar and the Rohingya genocide, whose role should not be underestimated when we talk about different avenues for action at the UN. So the SG appointed a special envoy, as was mentioned. The SG also has the powers under Article 99 of the UN Charter, and those are to bring to the attention of the Security Council any matter which may threaten maintenance of international peace and security. And of course, Myanmar falls under that category. In fact, the Secretary General, exactly 3 years ago, almost now, it was in September 2017, shortly after the clearance operations began in August of 2017, he sent a letter to the Security Council urging them to pay more attention to this situation. It was actually the first time the Secretary General has done something like that since the 80s. So there's a variety of responses at the UN's disposal to respond to mass atrocities. The Secretary General also commissioned the independent inquiry into Myanmar and how the UN was involved in the response to the situation there. So that became known as the Rosenthal Report. That report was released last year and found many systemic and structural shortcomings. With all this multitude of action, unfortunately, where we see the situation is ongoing atrocities in Myanmar. The Rohingya still lack citizenship. There's no freedom of movement in their own country. They lack access to basic services. They don't have ability to vote, which is crucial ahead of the elections in November. So what can be done? Starting with the Secretary General. It's been 3 years. So I believe that the Secretary General should again use Article 99 once again and bring Myanmar to the attention of the Council, especially since the Council has not been very active on the situation in Myanmar. What else? The concerned members of the council should request the SG to brief the council in an open session. There have been a few meetings earlier this year, but none of them have been discussed openly. They were not public, and that does impact the level of the pressure that is being put on Myanmar. So members of the council could request the Secretary General to brief the council in an open session. It will be an opportunity to examine the situation there 3 years since the genocide began. We know that the council meetings have a serious impact on the government, even though Security Council has not done a lot when it comes to resolutions or any other products that would impose sanctions or referral to the ICC. We do know that even by having a meeting, they have an impact. Every time the meeting is announced, there is reportedly a frenzied activity within Myanmar to kind of respond to those meetings. They often create commissions or announce directives before council meetings. And while those commissions are often meaningless, it does show us that the council attention to the matter really makes a difference. And council members should take advantage of that power and meet regularly in an open format on Myanmar to discuss it, even though a resolution might be not always possible for them to do. So in order for those meetings to take place, this is when we need to talk about coalitions and what can be done, right? So NGOs need to have constant advocacy ongoing with the pen holder, which is the United Kingdom, the pen holder on this issue on the council, but also with all elected members of the council, especially those from the Asia region and members of the OIC. The coalition of states also has to lobby these governments to do more. Currently these members are Vietnam and Indonesia that are Asian members. They're also members of the ASEAN. Niger and Tunisia are members of the OIC. So these states need to be encouraged to do more on Myanmar during their time on the council. When it comes to General Assembly, they're about to start negotiating their annual resolution on Myanmar soon, which was usually negotiated and released in the fall and winter. So this is also an opportunity for all member states to endorse, again, the independent mechanism on Myanmar to ensure it will be funded to continue its operations. This resolution should also express explicit support for the ICJ case on Myanmar and ensure that Myanmar will comply with the provisional measures. The provisional measures ordered by the ICJ really present an opportunity to all UN bodies to re-engage on this file. So the Security Council has a role in ensuring that the provisional measures are implemented. The General Assembly has a role in ensuring the compliance, and the SG, all of these bodies can really examine that not enough is being done by Myanmar, which we know now is the case, in addressing the root causes of the genocide and really pressure on Myanmar to do so. And the more engagement there is, the better. So keeping that agenda alive is very important, even though sometimes it's difficult to have products. It's still important to keep it on the agenda to ensure that there's accountability if certain benchmarks are not met, that these different bodies have to really point to that. So the Security Council, for example, only issued one presidential statement on this in 2017. It is now time to look at those recommendations and really say that, well, none of the recommendations to Myanmar from 3 years ago were met, which means that we need to do more. And even if there is a threat of a veto, I think it is time to be a little more courageous and push members who are unwilling to have this move forward, if needed, to veto it. At least at that point, it will be clear to the world that these particular governments are propping and supporting a genocidal regime. So I think it's time for all member states to be active on this file and for NGOs to really keep the pressure and engage with these member states to ensure all these different opportunities are taken up and acted upon. So I'm going to stop here, but any questions later on, very much welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadira, and thanks for a very comprehensive overview, and also your work in rounding up NGOs to meet with the special envoy on Burma or various other experts at the UN is very much appreciated and part of the consensus building that includes both civil society, but also stakeholders in the ASEAN countries and in the OIC. So speaking of the OIC, the next speaker is Dr. Wakar Uddin. He's a Rohingya American born in Rakhine State in Burma. He is currently a professor at Pennsylvania State University, the Director General of Arakan Rohingya Union, the founding chairman of the Burmese Rohingya Association of North America, and the Supreme Council member of the Muslim World League. Dr. Uddin works to seek a political solution to the problems faced by the Rohingya ethnic minority in Burma. If I could have the first slide, please. Including bringing in, I just lost my screen here, including bringing in the Rohingya genocide court case in the International Court of Justice led by Gambia. He has played a leading role in international advocacy for Rohingya people in the UN General Assembly, Security Council, Human Rights Council, OIC Council of Foreign Ministers, and legislative and government bodies in several countries. If we could have the next slide. Dr. Uddin received the OIC International Leadership Award in 2019 for excellence in leadership, working with the Gambia's Justice Minister, Mr. Tambadou, whom we saw just earlier, and OIC in the International Court of Justice in the Rohingya genocide case. So welcome to the panel, Dr. Wakar.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Adem, for your kind words in the intro. Yes, my mission is to find a peaceful solution to the crisis faced by our people in our homeland of Arakan, known as Rakhine State, to live in security and in harmony with other fellow ethnic minorities like our ancestors, our forefathers lived. Because of the plight of Rohingya people, we took the issue to OIC. That has led to further advancing the issue at the United Nations General Assembly, Security Council, Human Rights Council, and others in international stage. After years of work and a long journey, now the issue is at the ICJ, the World Court. Before I start this topic, actually, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate all the Rohingya students in Arakan, Rakhine State, in Maundo and Buthidaung, passing their tough matriculation examination with up to 6 distinctions. There are 6 subjects, all 6 distinctions. They passed, many students. The result came out just yesterday. What does that great academic achievement means for these students? That means they will be qualified to get into top universities in the country with great professional measures. The question is, will they be banned by Myanmar government again for attending colleges and universities like they did to thousands of Rohingya students in the past? That will be another issue that we'll have to deal with. Okay, now on this topic, in this brief presentation of 10 minutes, I will first give an overview of how we arrived to this stage, to this point at ICJ, building the coalition with the OIC member countries, the European countries, North American countries, and others. Then the other 2 parts of my presentation here, one is the current, what is the situation right now, current status, and the future outlook. How does it look, the court case, where we're going to go from here. Will be covered. If it is not enough time, then we can put that in the discussion sessions after this, session. First, let me start with the role of OIC. OIC has taken three-step approach to address the plight of Rohingya. First, number one, political advocacy at the United Nations and with other world powers, including United States, Canada, Europeans, and even China and Russia, believe it or not, no stone left unturned by OIC looking for the solution, even approaching Chinese and Russians on this. And then that was political advocacy. And then humanitarian approach, where OIC and several member countries providing humanitarian support in refugee camps in Bangladesh and as well as in IDP camps in Rakhine state. And then now third approach is the legal case, which is now at the ICJ. Actually, for quite some time, we have been brainstorming the legal issue in the framework of international jurisprudence at the OIC headquarters in Jeddah and also in several OIC contact group meetings. Then the process in OIC officially began in 2018 during the OIC Council of Foreign Ministers conference in Dhaka, Bangladesh, and the OIC foreign ministers giving visits to the refugee camps, Rohingya refugee camps in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh. We, with the OIC, rallied for about 2 years for the legal solution to be added to the repertoire of the OIC actions in support of the Rohingya people. Of course, when it comes to legal aspect, there has to be a serious investigation to which legal approach will be most suitable and most sustainable. We have brainstormed for quite some time about which route to take, where to do that, which international legal body that we should go to. Initially, there were some disagreements about ICC, International Criminal Court, because many countries within the OIC and even in EU, European Union, are not party to the Roma Statute. So it did not seem to be appropriate. And there was ICJ, the World Court, which has symbolic as well as legal importance to this. So OIC worked very hard to get all the 57 member countries to approve it. And this effort was led by Gambia, which was appointed as chair of the ad hoc committee for this and co-chaired by Bangladesh. Alhamdulillah, we have first landmark decision for Rohingya people came from ICJ on January 23rd this year in 2020, where ICJ issued the fantastic verdict on provisional measures with 4 specific orders to Myanmar, Burma, for compliance and measures to be taken on the ground to protect Rohingya people from genocidal acts and crimes. I want to mention one thing, a very important highlight, that is, the ad hoc judge, one ad hoc in the hearing, one ad hoc judge was appointed by Myanmar. That judge also voted for this the decision. That's a unanimous vote. The provisional measure decision was unanimous vote, and Myanmar's ad hoc judge was also part of it, making unanimous vote, basically agreeing that genocidal crimes are taking place in Rakhine state, and that must be stopped, and that must be further prevented. Now, the current status. Yes, there was a change on Gambia side with new minister coming in, and then Minister Tambadou has been actually very fantastic, and inshallah, but now our new minister, Dora Jello, taking this portfolio will continue the same way. Our legal team in Washington has already been established, and the new minister will be working with them. Even before this COVID pandemic, this sort of cases at ICJ normally takes few years. Our case will continue as the court has accepted it and already gave the first verdict. As you know, ICJ normally hears cases of maritime conflict, border dispute between countries. But our case is very different. Rohingya people are not the nationals of Gambia, but Gambia is fighting for an ethnic minority group in Myanmar, which is thousands of miles away from Gambia. This is a result of the international coalition, first at the UN Fact-Finding Commission submitting the report and ICJ accepting it. This is an example of coordinated efforts by OIC, United Nations, and many other countries and governments to keep pressure on Myanmar. Yes, coalition is also getting bigger now. You will remember the country of Maldives has joined the Gambia, and many countries in OIC and Europe and North America are pouring in various forms of support. Another good example is the ICC now, which was inspired by ICJ case, and the ICC is reopening its investigation. This is part of the coalition building. Now, what's next? The court has given a clear path forward. In this current process, one thing we means the Arakan Rohingya Union, the organization formed by OIC on behalf of Rohingya people, are making sure that we provide regular reports to the OIC on the current situation on the ground in Arakan, and whether there are violations on the ground by Myanmar or any positive developments in line with the ICJ's verdict on provisional measures. The Arakan Rohingya unions regularly report to OIC is instrumental in advancing the case with important information as our report goes not just to OIC and its member states, but also to many other countries. That is a great coalition building effort. Our contact group meeting will continue, OIC, a contact group meeting will continue, and member states will affirm their support for Rohingya cause. To wrap it up, I want to close with this. OIC has passed over 20 resolutions on Rohingya issues, and so did by UNGA with third committee and stuff, right? At least a dozen by UNGA and several by Human Rights Council, US Congress, several of them, and then European Union. So these actions by the international community must be sustained for further coalition building. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Wakar. Yes, speaking of coalition building, the next speaker is from the International Coalition for the Rohingya. We all are very engaged with building coalitions, but Simon Billenness has worked to promote democracy and human rights in Burma for over 25 years. Starting in the early 1990s, he organized shareholder activism and the use of state and local selective purchasing laws to put pressure on corporations to withdraw from Burma. He co-authored the Massachusetts Burma Selective Purchasing Law with State Representative Byron Rushing and led the grassroots lobbying campaign to enact it. Later, he helped defend the law from challenge at the World Trade Organization and in the US Supreme Court. He also helped found the US Campaign for Burma and served on the board of directors and as executive director. In 2016, Simon Billenness founded the International Campaign for the Rohingya, where he serves as board treasurer and executive director. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you, Adam. And yeah, the name of the organization is indeed the International Campaign for the Rohingya.
Sorry.
Our goal is always to work in coalition with others, and our job is to amplify the voices of the Rohingya in the corridors of power, and we do that by creating campaigns and actions that people can take that get the voices of the Rohingya and the interests of the Rohingya in lobbying of Congress, lobbying of the administration, other governments, but also, we've had a real big focus on ending corporate partnerships with Burmese military-owned companies. And it's part of a larger No Business with Genocide campaign that we have. And the goal of this is to really kind of get at the root of the problem in Myanmar, which is the army. It's the Myanmar army that has been committing the genocide against the Rohingya and other crimes against humanity and other war crimes against other ethnic minorities like the Karen and the Kachin and the Shan. And so what we do with our campaigns is our goal is to get the Burmese military out of politics, out of business, into the barracks under civilian control. Because we think over the long term, that's one of the biggest solutions that we can take to end the violence and the genocide in Myanmar. So, we've got an active list of supporters all around the world. That's now grown to over 13,000, taking hundreds of actions, emailing their elected representatives, contacting companies every week. And what we're doing right now is we've been working again in coalition with a number of organizations, including Justice for All and Burma Task Force, in putting specific pressure on a number of key companies that are in business partnerships with the Myanmar military. Because the Myanmar military has a vast business empire, and it's a way in which we, in our role as citizens, can enact our own citizen sanctions on the Burmese military every day by taking action. So to go into a little bit deep, look at a little bit deeper, we've got a number of specific campaigns aimed at Facebook, aimed at jewelry retailers like Angara and Harry Winston, which is owned by Swatch, to press those jewelry companies not to buy gems that profit the Burmese military, because the Burmese military dominates the trade in both jade and rubies from Burma. And we also have a big campaign focused on the Japanese beverage giant Kirin, which owns craft breweries and distilleries in the United States and the UK and Australia and New Zealand, and has a worldwide business. And we're putting pressure on Kirin to end two business partnerships it has, two breweries in Burma that where it's a partner with the Burmese military-owned companies. So this is part of a sort of a larger campaign, No Business with Genocide, which is based on the premise that regimes all around the world need foreign investment and need foreign trade, and by putting restrictions on that, by making it clear to companies that they should not do business with governments that engage in genocide or crimes against humanity, we can create pressure through those companies on those governments not to cross certain lines. And we've saw this successfully in the case of Chevron, where we organized not just consumers of Chevron, but also shareholders in Chevron, who filed a shareholder resolution at Chevron, specifically asking the company to adopt this policy of not doing business with governments engaged in genocide or crimes against humanity. Now, Chevron is the largest US investor in Burma, and it's been there for decades. And as a result of this pressure from both this public campaign and also the shareholder resolution, Chevron told the BBC that they were raising human rights issues directly with the Myanmar government. And the reason they gave for that was because they were hearing about this from their own shareholders. And so that was public. And that was a perfect example of how the pressure that we can wield on companies can in turn put pressure directly on the Myanmar government. So I'm putting in the I'm going to put in the message box here so everyone can read it. There's actually a blog that we put together focused on Kirin, which shows people exactly how they can. Oops, I just send that to Nadira only. I meant to send that to everybody. Here we go. All right, there you go. And this gives you an example of ways in which, as an individual, you can put effective pressure on a company, not just by signing the petition to the company demanding that they end this business partnership with Myanmar's military, but also making that call much more public by posting that on the company's social media, on their Instagram, on their Facebook, on their LinkedIn accounts. And we've been successful in getting hundreds of people to do this, and every day these companies are hearing from their own customers and their own shareholders to end these kinds of partnerships. Now, this work's been very successful, not only with the Chevron success that I mentioned, but we also got the big jewelry company Cartier to stop buying any gems mined in Burma. And that was purely through a petition and posts on the company's social media, particularly Facebook. We've also was successful in getting Western Union to drop as one of its agents in Burma a military-owned bank, the Miyawadi Bank. And again, they did that with a consumer petition, consumer pressure, and also a group of shareholders filed a shareholder resolution at Western Union, also asking them to do this. More recently, and I'll also post some links to some of our other petitions and campaigns. In all of this work, what we do is we identify key targets, companies that are susceptible to the combination of consumer pressure, shareholder pressure, and media pressure on their reputation and image. And we look to help people exert their power in all three of those pressure points. Right now, as I mentioned on the No Genocide Gems campaign that we have, we're focused on Angara.com, which is an online jewelry company, and also Harry Winston, which is a extremely luxury and high-end jeweler that's owned by Swatch of Switzerland. And again, we have a petition. We ask people to post on their social media. And we uncovered those two companies through simple research of Googling Burmese gems, Burmese rubies, and finding on both of these companies' websites gems that they proudly said were rubies from Burma. And that was how we were able to uncover that. So that gives you an example of our campaigns. And as well as providing campaigns that people can join in as individuals, we've also worked with a number of NGOs and CSOs to write letters to companies. We've organized shareholders to file shareholder resolutions and write their own shareholder letters to these companies. And we also continually put out information to the media so that they cover these campaigns and put additional pressure on those companies. And this is, all about, how we as individuals can take effective action every day to put pressure on the Burmese military, particularly through their business empire, and to use that to effectively put enough pressure on the company to end the genocide, end the crimes against humanity, and start to roll them back and get them back into the barracks under civilian control.
Thank you so much, Simon. And I do apologize for calling it International Coalition instead of International Campaign. You spoke eloquently about campaign work, and we'll have a chance to speak more. The next speaker, I wanted to just preface my introduction of Myra to mention that one of our comments has brought up the importance of the institutionalization, let me say that again, the institutionalization of information sharing among academics, lawyers, humanitarian actors, activists, and NGOs. So how we can build networks. And again, this is exactly what we discussed in a meeting yesterday that Myra was facilitating among Kachin, Karen, Rohingya, Rakhine, and others from the impacted communities of Burma. We've been talking about building relationships and building campaigns among other stakeholders, but key in all of this is, well, the impacted community or communities. Myra Dahgaypaw is a Karen human rights activist from Karen State, Eastern Burma. She was an internally displaced person and a refugee prior to resettling in the US. Since the age of 13, Myra has played a strong role in her community as an organizer and human rights advocate. Previously, Myra worked as a human rights advocate at the United Nations with the Burma Fund, United Nations office. Prior to taking on the managing director position, she fulfilled the roles of campaign coordinator and policy advisor at US Campaign for Burma. By seeking justice and accountability, Myra hopes one day to see a unified country at peace once the crimes against humanity and unchecked impunity in Burma are put to an end. Until that day, Myra will continue advocating international and US leaders and policymakers to promote and support the movement for human rights and freedom and genuine democracy in Burma, as well as to provide aid and support for humanitarian needs. Myra represents the US Campaign for Burma. Welcome, Myra.
Oh, thank you, Ed. And thank you everyone for joining the call today, the conference today. So to me, for indeed, ethnic coalition and community participation in this Burma advocacy effort is very crucial. And I do respect ethnic coalition and community participation very much because we will talk about the suffering of the people in Burma, let alone Rohingya or other ethnic groups. But the problem is that we cannot understand the pain they are going through and they went through. And therefore, having them into the circle of our advocacy effort is very crucial. Their voices are needed. So yesterday, with the help of Burma Task Force, Justice for All, we had a roundtable discussion for about 2 hours, which we had about 28 participants, including the organizers. And earlier, like Adem said, that was include the Rohingya, Rakhine, Kachin, and Karen, and also, of course, from those in Canada as well as the US. It was a very nice conversation. Of course, we had a lot to talk about. We had I mean, you name it, all kinds of problems we have, from different kinds of human rights abuses and mass atrocities, lack of humanitarian assistance. Refugees and IDPs have been forgotten for all these years. We barely talk about them, let alone they're still ongoing fleeing that leads to the increasing of IDPs, not just Eastern Burma, but also western side of Burma. And so we talk about all this stuff, but at the same time, the question also was that, like earlier, the people asked, that the person asked, and also Jeff is asking, Jeff, I saw your question and it is a very good one. So how do we work together? How do we create a stronger coalition? And work together. So basically, what we came up was that, yes, all these issues are important, but this was our second meeting. And so perhaps it might be a little too fast for us to say, okay, let's go from here to there. We're not really at that point yet. So basically, instead of jumping to creating an organization or something, our plan was to first create a networking group, and then from there, okay, are we going to network via email or Zoom monthly? So those are the talks that we had yesterday. But also at the same time, from there, we can also figure out, okay, where to prioritize which issues, whether health issues or education issues or human rights abuses issues, land grab that leads to internally displaced as well as refugees, and how the refugees and IDPs can continue getting their getting support while the people who run the country don't have any feeling of helping these people. I wonder if they even care whatever that goes on with this with the people in their country. So basically, overall, we have to come up with systematic strategies that is that has regular meeting discussion, and also so that we can sustain this group to work for the long-term solution. And therefore, we need stronger communication for this networking group. But at the same time, of course, we will need those who will be willing to take on the responsibility at one point. I don't really think Burma Task Force will be babysitting us all the time, and they also have a lot of other stuff to do. So all these stuff are things that we talked about yesterday, and we will be meeting again next month on the 5th of September, I believe. And from there, we probably might progress to a different step. So basically, that is where we are right now. And I found it very positive that everyone was enthusiastic, but at the same time, they're very cautious, because this is not a one-time work, and all of them, they don't want the meeting to be just one time. They want something that is sustainable, that can continue, because creating an organization is very easy, but it falls apart in a couple of years, or sometimes it doesn't even last a year. So nobody wants that. And I think that is a very good start, where everyone wants everything to be strong enough. But coming back to advocacy and coalition, I just wanted to point out a few things from to our friends who do the advocacy in the international arena and who are not Burmese. As I always said, and I will say it again, I do apologize if I say something against anyone, but I wanted to say it because I wanted to say it, because I wanted to make it clear. So please practice inclusivity in any engagement when talking about Burma. I know we all are working on different issues, and I really appreciate all the effort that everyone is putting in. But one thing that I realize is that a lot of times we talk about a lot of things, but we forget to tie things together. And that is the Burmese government and the Burma army take it into their benefit. Because, for instance, we talk a lot about Rohingya issues, and I totally understand, I sympathize with them. We have to talk about it. But also remember, other ethnic groups are suffering. So if you can please tie it very quickly at the end of your talk or your statement, that the suffering is not just one group. It is all the ethnic groups, but the perpetrator is the same person. If we can remind our audience, our readers, our government officials, that'll be a plus. That is what I see. And also another thing is, if we do it more and more that way, it will also create positive feedback from other ethnic minorities. Because from my personal experience, talking to many people in my own community, my other friends from other ethnic minorities, some of the times they have that unpleasant feeling like, what about our suffering? Is it not visible enough? Is it not big enough that people can talk about it? And it leads me to the point where I feel as though I'm not doing my work, because I am out here, I'm meeting more people at different levels, and I have to say what I have to say because I wanted to amplify their voices. And that is why I'm telling you now what I heard from them. And also when we do it this more, then they will start seeing, oh, they care about us too. Our issues also matter for them. From then, another positive thing that can bring in is, well, our issue is the same. We fought against the same person, although our suffering may be at a different time, at different situation, or the intensity might be different. But we all have to come together and support each other. That is very important, that many of us need to understand from outside of Burma as well as inside Burma, and from the Burmese diasporas as well as the international community who come in and work, international NGOs or NGOs who come in and work on Burma issues. Please don't look at Burma issue as separate from each other, or Rohingya's issue is separate from Kachin or Rakhine. I'm not saying anyone is doing anything wrong, but I'm just reminding everyone that we are all interconnected and our issue is interconnected, and we have to bring it together in order to bring down this the ridiculous Burmese military regime, as well as the racist government that is in the power now. And also to my ethnic minorities, I'm not calling you ethnic minority in the sense that you are minority in the voice, but because we are the lesser number, but not because we have the lesser power. I want you to understand that. The fact is that your suffering is matter. It's just that the more important part is us ourselves that have to bring it out. Also, we have to make ourselves known. We cannot wait for other people to come in and speak on our behalf. And we all should know that doing advocacy is a very tedious job. It's not going to happen overnight. So talking one time is not enough. I'm saying this just because of my own experience with my own people. My people, the Korean people, they don't like to talk too much. So when they say they advocate 2-3 times, they think, okay, they already know. That is why we don't need to say it too many often because we're going to get the US government angry. No, that's not the case. Say it as many times as you want, whether they hear it or not. Whether they hear it 100 times, it's not enough. So you have to keep banging on the door and keep saying it to them. Number 2, we also have to realize that we are not the only one who suffer. All our brothers and sisters in the country are suffering, and some of them may have to suffer more than us. But let's not say, okay, my suffering is bigger than yours, so I need more attention. It's not something like that. When we build up the coalition, let's try and put ourselves together in a unified position, but let's not look at the quantity or the level of intensity. Instead, think about it this way. If we don't do it, who's going to do it for us? If we don't talk about Rakhine issue, if I don't talk about Rohingya issues, let's pretend that there's nobody out there that will speak to that for them. So it is our responsibility to speak out for each other. And only then the Burmese military, the Burma army and the Burmese government will realize that, holy cow, these ethnic minorities, we cannot separate them. They know each other suffer and they know their common enemy. And that is why now they stand up together, they fight for each other. And probably there might be one point that we probably have to give up and listen to them instead of pulling them apart. So by working together, that by working together, that will be a better option instead of talking about who suffer more and who suffer less. I said that yesterday in our roundtable meeting too. I didn't say it to hurt anyone's feeling, in case if anybody thought that I said something very strongly to my own fellow Burmese diaspora. I didn't say it in a sense that I wanted to I disrespect anybody, but I just wanted to let everyone know that at this moment, we don't have you or I suffering, but we all are suffering, and we have to speak out for each other. We have to build up this coalition. How do we do it? That is the matter of we started now, and we started yesterday, which was a great thing. I'm really looking forward to future what will progress. And going back to Jeff, I think Jeff comment. I think if we can do this outside positively, inside also, we have a lot of people who support each other, but we still don't have enough. We still have to build up that coalition, and I'm pretty sure there are some group inside also are working hard on the issues, and I'm just hoping that. Oh, I'm really sorry. I went over my time. I just saw it right now. I'm really sorry. But yeah, I'm going to stop here. The most important thing is to work together. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Myra. You know, I was wondering, you mentioned, and Simon mentioned, I think everyone has said that there is one common enemy, and that is the Myanmar military. That's the corrupt and brutal military and its policies. And it's used divide and conquer tactics to divide the ethnic groups from each other. And obviously, it's time to come together. It takes communication, it takes trust building. It's tedious, as was said. It takes patience because this is a long-term struggle. And as was mentioned in yesterday's meeting, many of the communities here, whether they're Karen or whether they're Baptist Karen or whether they're Muslim Rohingya or whatever they may be, they're rather separated from each other still. They're still divided. And so there's a lot of work to do on many levels and in building this alliance that we're talking about. I wanted to ask, because there's always history and there's always reasons that people can find to mistrust. But somehow, often, we have to put that aside for the basic bottom line, which is struggling for justice and peace and justice. So I wanted to ask, maybe going back to the UN space, about some of the challenges there. Is it a challenge to establish trust with nation states, member nations of the UN? Is trust not necessarily an issue, but it's hard for us to trust member nations because some of them have terrible human rights records, and yet we have to work with them. We need them. So maybe if Nadira and also Dr. Wakar could address that relationship building.
Thank you, Adam. Maybe I'll make a few comments, and thank you to all the panelists who spoke earlier. I just want to reiterate what Myra said, what also Simon mentioned and others, that there is one enemy really, and that's the military, but also the civilian government as well. They also continue to discriminate against not only the Rohingya, but also many other ethnic minorities, and that includes still the tiered citizenship system that is extremely discriminatory, that affects so many minorities and making some more important than others, and which has to be completely changed. I guess the challenges that sometimes we see with tying it together, which is absolutely essential, and I 100% agree that that's important. In fact, we always emphasize that inability to hold perpetrators accountable really allows them to attack other vulnerable populations, and dividing and ruling and kind of trying to separate the ethnic groups is their strategy. What we're seeing in Rakhine state now is the consequences of previous impunity. So the Arakan army fight right now in Rakhine state. It displaces not only Rakhine civilians who are Buddhists, also Rohingya, also Maro, also many other ethnic groups who live in Rakhine state and call that state home. So it's very important to address it holistically. Going back to challenges, sometimes it's the jurisdictional question. So when it comes to ICJ, the reason it was, the Gambia was able to take it to the ICJ was based on the Genocide Convention. And in this case, it's only the Rohingya issue that falls under the genocide category, right? So because of that, a jurisdictional opportunity that one state was able to take Myanmar to the International Court of Justice for violating the Genocide Convention. The same with ICC, because of the Bangladesh-Myanmar border and the fact that the majority of refugees that fled were Rohingya, it's primarily based on them. But I think we should, whenever possible, take advantage of these opportunities while working together and really realizing that addressing this issue may seem for one minority, it's actually addressing it for the whole country. And if we can hold perpetrators accountable, it will have a positive impact on so many ethnic groups within Myanmar. In the meantime, we have to continue working together. So the multitude of coalitions that exist, and sometimes just to address some of the comments I'm seeing, which are saying that there's not enough coalitions. And of course, there's probably will never be enough to, I guess, organizations to bring us together. Some of it is because challenges in terms of capacities or reaching people when necessary. The pandemic also hampered some of these efforts. But many such opportunities already exist and are ongoing. There's behind the scenes efforts. There's always a push for to bring NGO and civil society and activists briefers to the Security Council, for example, to brief them there, to meet with different UN bodies. Also, there are opportunities for informal exchanges, for strategy and coordination meetings that exist that I'm not at liberty to talk about publicly, but they bring together international NGOs and local NGOs as well for security reasons. Some of it is not covered by the media. So I think it's those efforts exist and they have to continue as much as possible while we try to find opportunities in multilateral arena to take forward accountability efforts as well as political efforts at the UN, at individual countries, at regional organizations, and wherever possible. Thank you.
Yes, to add to what Nadira has said, the trust building and confidence building and coalition building. I'll take you to a model system of OIC. When we started this with OIC, 57 member countries, it's amazing how they came all together with one voice, 57 countries passing resolutions of resolutions because of the facts. Facts have displayed to them the situation, the crisis they understood. Now we went to second step, which is European Union. Now we have in UNGA, for many years, General Assembly, we have resolutions coming with partnership with the European Union countries, with OIC. That's very significant. That's what the trust is. Now, OIC has reached out to many other countries. There are efforts made by OIC to build even trust with Chinese and Russians, you know, as this is not a political issue. Chinese, Russians vetoed an opposition in Security Council and others because as a political perspective, this is truly humanitarian issue. We are talking about humanity. They are Rohingya people are humans like Chinese, like Russians. So why can't you do something to save the humanity? Forget about political component. So there are opportunities. to bring many countries in the fold, countries beyond OIC, beyond European Union. And the US government has been quite steadfast in supporting this ICJ case and Rohingya issue. And Canadian, you have seen Canadian foreign minister speaking. So the coalition getting is better, trust is getting better, but we have to get the message out. What the reality on the ground.
That's interesting. And I wondered about communication with corporations. Does one address the moral aspect, which Dr. Wakar was just alluding to, or do you talk about the bottom line? How do you combine it, or how do you approach corporations? That would be Simon. Yeah.
I figured as much. But the key thing about corporations is understanding is what moves them is money. In the same way, it's important to understand that what moves politicians is votes. Those are the drivers. And in all of our corporate campaigns, we're making moral arguments. We're also explaining that doing business with the Myanmar military is bad for their business. But underscoring the argument is the power, and the power is, I'm a consumer and I'm not going to buy your goods anymore if you keep doing this, or and things like that. So it's important to understand the difference between ask, which is your argument, and then the power you put behind that ask. And in the case of corporations, the power is, again, pressure from consumers, pressure from shareholders, and pressure on their image and reputation through the media, and particularly social media.
And Simon, you've been mentioning, well, we've all been discussing the ICJ case. And recently in California, Facebook was brought to court. Plaintiffs were asking for Facebook to provide Facebook links to the generals, to military who had been inciting violence against the Rohingya over many years. And yet Facebook is not cooperating. I was wondering if you could comment about that as an opportunity for activism.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is part of the reasons why we're putting this pressure on Facebook through our Facebook campaign. And if you check out our petition, which has all of the arguments and also links to resources, one of the things we point out is that, yeah, Facebook, the Myanmar military use their Facebook accounts to promote hate speech against the Rohingya, hate speech against Muslims, and to organize that and foment that and to exacerbate that. And for that reason, in 2018, Facebook closed down a number of those military accounts. What the lawyers for Gambia are asking for is for those posts and communications from those accounts. It's very specific. Since then, by the way, the Burmese military has opened new accounts, and Facebook has allowed them to do that. And these are explicitly propaganda accounts that the Myanmar military has opened. And so what we're asking Facebook to do is to release all this information, this evidence of hate speech, which is evidence of genocidal intent, to the court. That's trying Myanmar on charges of genocide in International Court of Justice. We're also asking Facebook to close down all Myanmar military accounts, not just the military's own accounts, but also military-owned company accounts. The Burma Campaign UK has listed a whole range of Burmese military-owned company accounts which have stayed on Facebook for this duration. And so those are the asks that we're making of Facebook. And again, we're putting consumer pressure, media pressure, shareholder pressure on Facebook to comply with this.
Thank you. Interesting. And Myra, I wanted to ask a little bit more about working with CBOs that are still in Burma, and maybe others can jump in on this subject as well. There's surveillance, there's harassment. The government and the military have minders that watch civil society in Burma. One doesn't want to get people in trouble. And this may be one aspect, though it's not an excuse, but it may be one aspect of why sometimes local voices are not heard because they have to stay in the background for their own safety's sake. Do you agree with that, or would you push back against that interpretation?
Well, maybe I'm not agree, but also maybe I mean, I cannot totally understand the place where they come from. One way or the other, the Burmese government as well as the Burma army will put fear on these people because these people are the messenger for those who are suffering. So now we see they shut down the internet for about a year already. And then those who are writing about the situation on the ground, they get arrested, they throw in jail. All this in order to scare people so that people don't do what they're supposed to do. But at the same time, there are a lot of people who risk their lives. Well, it's okay if I get arrested, but if other people are saved. So we have a lot of brave people at the same time as well, or a lot of people are also working underground. I do work with a few underground groups where they're very brave. So I don't really translate it as though because of that, then they are fear and they may not do anything, maybe not. But I also wanted to encourage the international community, those who have, especially those who have connection with the media, the news groups or the big companies, newspapers, those people. If you have connection with those people, just lead them to the information source back to Burma. Because, for instance, now the rising of the Karen community start protesting is a good thing because now it's only the matter of the issue is coming from within. People are start uprising and then showing off what they need, calling for what they need, but nobody pick it up. And we do need international media, big mainstream media to pick up this information because only 2 to 3 days ago, you might see the USCB current op-ed on Karen News. 3 people were arrested and nobody knows about it. And they were arrested as a result of leading the protests. So this kind of stuff is very important that we also have to bring this forward to the people, the channel that we know so that they know about what's going on the ground.
Thank you. Well, we have about 15 more minutes. And so maybe it's time to speak a bit about action steps. I mean, I know we have been already. There are so many concerns. At yesterday's meeting, donor fatigue was mentioned because during COVID, nation states, donor nations are going to be very distracted and stretched thin. There's the need for EU sanctions. There's many needs, but again, I was wondering how everyone would prioritize the needs that they see at this moment. So maybe Dr. Wakar, if you'd like to start.
You are talking about donor fatigue?
Just in general, the needs that you see most pressing at the moment.
What they need is really, I don't want to diverge from your question, but they really need is the repatriation of the Rohingya refugees. You know, there's a donor issue that really goes to refugee situation. And COVID was one of our major concerns. But fortunately, according to latest report, we have 60 plus positive and 2 deaths. So, but beside COVID, the donors are doing okay with refugee camps in Bangladesh. I do want to mention this, not to forget that there are 20,000 or plus refugees in India. There's no donors coming forward. UNHCR has an office in New Delhi, but these refugees are in Hyderabad and Kashmir and other places. So these donors, we need donor for those refugees for their just food and relief supplies. And then let's go to Rakhine State inside Myanmar. That's even more critical. IDPs. Okay, there are several NGOs in Arakan State, but yet the IDP is not getting much supplies, donors. COVID was away. They are under the mercy of this coronavirus. They are not getting infection. They are not getting any help, but fortunately they didn't get infection. There are no disease yet that we know in the refugee camps, IDP camps in Sittwe. And their condition is terrible. Now, beyond that, another donor issue is Rohingya villages. Rohingya villages in Rohingya areas in northern Rakhine State, they're struggling. They do not have many families are hosting IDPs. What does that mean? People who did not go to IDP camps, did not cross to Bangladesh during the violence, they took shelter in other villages in their relatives and friends. So those people are hosting these people, homeless, their villages were burned, and they are strained financially. They do not have good income with farming or fishing, that kind of things. On top of that, they have to take care of this. So donors really, I appeal to international community to look into that seriously inside Rakhine State, not only IDP camps, the Rohingya community as a general, which are really surviving at the marginal level. So there are a variety of complexity of donor situation. Now, of course, like you said, the COVID situation is even making it worse.
One question that was just asked had to do with the rights and conditions for Christians in the camps in Bangladesh. And we have heard some reports of difficulties. Of course, there are many Christians, especially Baptists, among the Karen and other ethnic groups in Burma. And so, rather than just frame this as a religious struggle, because obviously it's not that. Religion is being instrumentalized and used politically to divide people. But as far as other religious minorities, I was wondering if, Myra, you wanted to just speak up for that as a way to include them in coalition building.
I think finally, one way or the other, we do have to bring in the religion coalition as well as the community coalition, because we're talking about the situation of the Christian Rohingya. Yes, they do need a lot more help, because I think very few people heard about this. I don't really hear a lot about it. Only one of them wrote to me, somebody from the camp wrote to me a couple times, and then I think somebody picked it up and wrote about it. So they still need a lot of help, but at the same time, of course, other Christians, not just Christian, the enemies also, even including Buddhist community in the ethnic minorities area, they are not treated as the Burmese majority, the Burman majority. So the religious persecution is there. And that is why we also, like I said earlier, as much as we need the ethnic participation to support each other, to build up a solidarity, the religion also has to come together, just not Christian, but also Christian working with the Buddhists, the Muslims, the Hindu. All of us have to come together to do this together in order to fight against this hideous monster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also related to that, in general terms, I wanted to ask Nadira, the UN High Commissioner for refugees, or rather the UNHCR and the IOM were involved with Bangladesh and Burma in this MOU between the nations. But apparently, and people can correct me if I'm wrong here, Rohingya leadership, local Rohingya voices were not included in that MOU in any way. And I was wondering if you could address that way of working at the UN or elsewhere.
Yes, it's actually very problematic that not only the Rohingya were not included, which is in this case so essential to include the community that you are, whose situation you're trying to address, but in general, the MOU is not public. We still don't know exactly what is in it, what they agreed on behind closed doors. So how can anybody try to see if that's being implemented or not? What we know is that the conditions in Myanmar are nowhere near conducive to a return. And return is essential, of course, right? Because refugees are suffering. The refugees are suffering in Bangladesh, in Thailand, in Malaysia, in so many countries from all over Myanmar. So it's essential that they're able to come back, but how can they come back if, when it comes to the Rohingya, if they still don't have citizenship, they still don't have freedom of movement, they still don't have access to any services, they're not able to vote. So all those conditions have to be addressed. So it is really incumbent upon UNHCR, on UNDP, on others part of the UN, including on the Secretary General. So the Rosenthal report I spoke about earlier, it highlighted that fault, that the UN is not speaking with one voice on this issue. So it is also up to the Secretary General to really intervene and make sure that those agencies are working together. They're working towards the common goal of addressing all those issues so that refugees can return. And involving local communities is essential. Not only those Rohingya in Bangladesh, but also a lot of Kachin who are based in China, in Thailand, who also have been there for decades. But also the Rohingya in Rakhine state in those IDP camps. They are claiming to close the camps, but essentially what happens is they just relocate them to a nearby area and they live in those segregated conditions that essentially are the same. So it's not a camp closure. They fail to consult communities and allow them to go back. So it also speaks about your previous question, Adem, about needs. What are the needs? The needs are so great that we can spend all day talking about it. But I think in essence, unless the government really, and the UN, importantly, starts to engage with local communities whose situation they're trying to improve and address, this will continue to persist.
And speaking of lack of transparency, I understand that the government of Burma's response to the ICJ, which came in late May, is also not public. And some advocacy groups have been asking for it to be made public. So we can assess whether or not there is any progress whatsoever in policy. And I was wondering if Dr. Wakar could address that question. Have you seen any progress at all?
Yes, you know, that's a very, very difficult question, a tricky question. What Myanmar government did was some cosmetic things on the ground so that they can file a report. Of course, report cannot be revealed. This is ICJ is a judicial system, it's a court. It cannot be politicized by any means. So if it's revealed, what is in the middle of the process of this case, it will be counterproductive. So it's understandably ICJ did not release that. But on the situation on the ground, pretty much everything is cosmetic. There's first of all, as you have seen in the media, President's office, Myanmar government President's office released 2 press statements, one for compliance, one for compliance of the with the ICJ court order. Another one is prevention, getting the reports on the ground, so on and so forth. you know, what ways really striking is this. I want to mention this. During that time, Myanmar government has released an order, President's office, to evict the Buddhist Rakhine, the government-supported group, from Rohingya homes. You know, during the violence, they've taken over Rohingya homes in situ, so many of them. So government has released an order to include the ICJ. So the order was released, and then after the report was submitted, the order was rescinded. So those people who were told by the government to leave Rohingya homes, they are occupied, did not leave. And this became like a joke. So there's nothing is going to take seriously because these cosmetic things they are continue to do. So to make long story short, the situation on the ground remains the same, in some cases even worse, with our army fighting. Another thing, you know, I want to mention one thing earlier, divide and rule thing. I was itching to talk about that. Just half a minute here. Divide and rule is just part of it. I was brought in Burma. I've seen on my own eyes until I left for United States to do my graduate studies. Myanmar, this is a fascist government, okay? Myanmar military. They not only want to divide and rule the minorities, they also have a big agenda. Military has the Burmanization. I'll give you a good example in Rakhine State. They want to transform all the ethnic minorities to Burmese, Burma. And they are finding obstacles because of Christianity, the Muslims, and others. So in Rakhine State, a good example is this. They have been successful in doing that, trying to transform Rakhine community into Burmese under the banner of union. You go to Rakhine State, go southern Rakhine State, those Rakhine people who has their own identity, own language, does not speak Burmese, Rakhine language. They speak Burmese. So they have been encroaching basically to make country just Burmans. And that's how Rakhine people, some of the Rakhine people have now woken up and see that Rohingya are not the threat to them. Like Myanmar military always tell them that, hey, these people are threat to your identity, your religion. But Rohingya people are not. Myanmar military, and they are the one going to swallow Rakhine community than they have recognized now. So this is not just divide and rule. There's a complexity behind it. Just I was itching to talk about that.
Yeah, and I hear in what you're discussing a kind of racist ideology as part of this this strategy, and so it's a very extreme exclusionary vision of Burma. And no wonder we have tens of thousands, and now more than that, displaced and with their lands stolen. And so this is a huge problem, and at least it is recognized as a global concern. At least that is the case. The Uyghur, the people of Kashmir, many other ethnic groups are also targeted in similar ways, in racist ways, in even genocidal ways. And so Justice for All appreciates that all the panelists and all those who are listening and participating in this conference share our concerns about this trend. It can't be allowed. We've got to take seriously the slogan, never again, instead of just hearing it as a slogan. Let's hear it as an actual plan of action to stop genocide and to ensure accountability. So we have to stop here. It's time to end, but please stay tuned for the fourth panel in a half an hour. This will be 5:30 New York time regarding steps forward. And I invite everyone to join all the panelists there. So again, thank you from Justice for All.